The Honorable the Speaker.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this house here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen. Amen. Namaste.
Vote or affirmation. Announcements by the Speaker.
Honorable members, I have received communication from the Honorable Dr. Nyan Gadsby Dolly, MP, member for St. Anne's East, and from Ms. Marlene McDonald, MP, member for Port of Spain South, both of whom have requested leave of absence from today's sitting of the House. The leave which the members seek is granted. Honorable members, you were notified on Thursday, September 5th, 2019, that the Leader of the Opposition submitted a private member's bill on Wednesday, September 4th, 2019, entitled the Sedition Repeal Bill 2019. A private member's motion for leave to introduce this bill has been placed on the order paper in accordance with Standing Orders 61-1 and 2. The matter will be taken later in the proceedings.
Bills brought from the Senate. Petitions. Papers.
Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam. Madam Speaker. Sorry. I have the honor to lay the following paper. Paper number 1, the ministerial response of the Ministry of Public Administration on the 22nd report of the Public Accounts Committee on the examination of the audited financial statements of the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial years 2010 to 2016. Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker.
The Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay paper number 2, the 41st annual report of the Ombudsman for the period January 2018 to December 2018. Thank you.
The Prime Minister.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay the following papers. The consolidated financial statements of the Urban Development Corporation of Trinidad and Tobago Limited for the financial years December 31st, 2008 to 2015. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that papers 3 to 10 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee.
Prime Minister, would that be the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee?
Public Accounts, in brackets, Enterprises Committee. Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, sir.
Honorable members, the question is that papers 3, to 10 be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it.
Reports from committees.
Member for Aruka Maloney.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to present the following reports. Report number 1, the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the miscellaneous provisions, Local Government Reform Bill 2019 in the 4th Session, 11th Parliament. Paper number 9, the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Constitution Amendment Tobago Self-Government Bill 2018 in the 4th Session, 11th Parliament. Paper number 10, the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the National Statistical Institute of Trinidad and Tobago Bill 2018 in the 4th Session, 11th Parliament. Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker.
Member for Karen East.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to present the following reports. Report number 2, the 20th report of the Public Accounts Enterprise Committee into the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of the Palo Seco Agricultural Enterprises Limited for the financial years 2012 to 2017. Paper number 3, the 22nd report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee into the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of the Trinidad and Tobago Creative Industries Company Limited for the financial years 2014 and 2015. And paper number 4, the 23rd report of the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee into the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheets, and other financial statements of the Invest-TT Limited for the years 2014 to 2017. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Laventille West. Leader of the House.
Very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on behalf of the member for Laventille West, I have the honor to present paper number 5, the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Private Security Industry Bill 2019 in the 4th Session, 11th Parliament.
Member for San Fernando West.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to present the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Cybercrime Bill 2017 in the 4th Session, 11th Parliament.
Member for Diego Martin, Northeast.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have the honor to present the following reports. The report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Gambling, Gaming and Betting Control Bill 2016 in the 4th Session, 11th Parliament. And the report of the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2018, the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2018, and the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2019 in the 4th Session, 11th Parliament.
Is number 5. Honorable members, I want to revert to paper number 5 and call upon the member for Port of Spain North, St. Anne's West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I have the honor to present the report on the Joint Select Committee appointed to consider and report on the Private Security Industry Bill 2019 in the 4th Session, 11th Parliament. Thank you.
Prime Minister's questions, urgent questions.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Education, could the Minister inform this House if there has been an outbreak of tuberculosis at the College of Science, Technology, and Applied Arts, the Chaguanas campus?
Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the College of Science, Technology, and Applied Arts, COSTAT, confirms that there is no tuberculosis outbreak at the Costat Shogunas campus. The HR division received communication on Wednesday, the 18th of September, of a suspected case of tuberculosis at the Shogunas campus. The employee in question had not been on campus for a number of days. However, upon receiving the information, the HSE department immediately contacted the USH agency, which advised the following. 1, the immediate testing of all employees who may have been exposed, and 2, a thorough sanitization of the workplace. All the employees who may have been exposed were tested and received negative results. The workspace was also sanitized according to USH guidelines. Upon confirmation that there were no infected employees at the campus, the college adhered to USH guidelines and informed all employees of the campus that it was safe to continue operations. Thank you very much.
Supplemental member for Curaçao.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Mr. Minister, you have indicated that a service provider was engaged to sanitize the campus. Did it take into consideration all employees and students? And further to that, was the campus declared
Member,
fit and proper by the USH agency?
Member, it's one question. Which one is it? It's one question. Which one is it?
Madam Speaker, if those on the other side want to come and ask the questions, they could do it.
Stop spreading the rumor.
Member for Caroni East. Member for Caroni East, question number 2.
Yeah, right. To the Minister of Health, to the Honorable Minister of Health, could the Minister inform the House why the Ministry failed to effectively assess and implement strong security measures in light of the recent robberies and break-ins at the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex?
Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. In a similar vein to the previous question, there has been no spate of break-ins. There has been no spate of robberies. One cell phone was stolen from one patient, valued $650. One cell phone was stolen from one patient. The Ministry of Health and the Minister of Health, about 3 years ago, after a false claim by an intern in Port of Spain about being robbed, I personally instructed the RHAs to have an appropriate mix of technology and human presence. And I'm happy to tell the country that the CCTV, which we installed recently, captured the image of the person who stole the one phone from the one patient. It has been handed over to the St. Joseph Police Station, and my information is an arrest is imminent because we instituted strong security measures using CCTV. Let me reiterate, it was one phone, one breaking, not a spate of breakings and not a spate of robberies. And I am sure to that one patient is a very serious matter, and we take that very seriously. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Supplemental member for Caroni.
Honorable Minister, are you aware of a newspaper report on Thursday, September 19, 2019, where it was reported that 2 intruders broke into the adult surgical ward and stole sleeping patient's cell phone and other valuable personal items? They were busy rummaging through patients' bags and pockets of their clothing when the lone nurse on duty walked into the ward for a routine inspection when she discovered them, and the nurse ran out screaming for help.
Okay.
Are you aware of that report on Thursday, September 19, 2019?
I am also aware of many media reports, and I will refer you to a front-page article in The Guardian, which featured an under-19 ex-cricketer saying he couldn't get blood, he couldn't get this, he couldn't get that, which was a total fabrication, and that made front page news in The Guardian. And The Guardian later mounted their own sting operation and caught that person lying. And that is what happens in this country.
Remember, there are
Madam
certain
Speaker,
words
I
that we
thank
don't
you.
use. So, remember for St. Joseph, Minister of Health, you know there are certain words that we don't use.
Oh, sorry.
Yes?
A gross untruth.
Yeah, good.
So we have to be very careful
Okay.
how we interpret what is carried in the news media.
Supplemental, member for Guaranese.
Are you aware that for months the nurses and the doctors at Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex have been crying for better security in the midst of a number of instances of burglaries and car breaking and getting into doctors' rooms when they're on duty in the night? Are you
Minister of
denying
Health.
that, Minister?
Minister of Health.
Madam Speaker, I thank you. And the RHA, who owns the property, I am sure they will take all appropriate measures and review all security measures. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Member for Princestown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, question 3 to the Minister of Finance. Given reports that the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service had not been receiving releases, could the Minister indicate how soon would the situation be rectified?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm not certain which reports the member for Princestown is referring to, but I was sent something 2 days ago, which is being circulated on social media, which reads as follows. Our police service has not received 1 red cent from you, speaking to me as Minister Imbert, to pay for goods and services since March. I understand that this was posted by one Kirk Waith, who now apparently has access to the confidential files in the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service Accounting Department, or is simply spreading untruths. Let me just tell you what the facts are. Let me tell you what the facts are, Madam Speaker.
You're entitled to supplemental.
Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Finance has assisted the police service. Whenever the police service is in need of funds, we meet with the police commissioner, and our staff collaborate and assist the police service whenever necessary. Let me just state the facts as given to me by the Ministry of Finance staff. The total budgeted expenditure for the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service for fiscal 2019, the recurrent allocation, 2.195 billion. Releases and expenditure so far, 2.104 billion. Let me repeat, Madam Speaker. The allocation for the TTPS for 2019, recurrent, 2.195 billion. Releases and expenditure so far, 2.104 billion. On the development program, allocation 56.1 million. Releases so far, 24.6 million. On the infrastructure development fund, allocation 68.5 million. Releases and expenditures so far, 53 million. And now let me deal with the specific allegation.
Your time is now spent.
Thank you.
Supplemental, member for Princestown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in light of the Minister's answer, there's clearly a breakdown of communication between the Minister and what's happening in the TTPS. And I'm hoping the Minister...
Is that the question?
No, ma'am, I'm getting...
So these are not statements. These are 15
Madam Speaker, the question is, in light of the seriousness of the matter that the TTPS is running on fumes for the past 6 months, could the Minister indicate whether he has been in direct contact with the Commissioner of Police to give any assurances since a public revelation by the Commissioner of Police yesterday on CNC3, or does the Minister have a case of PIP?
Madam Speaker, I would not accept anything said by the member for Princestown with respect to any alleged statement made by the Commissioner of Police. The Ministry of Finance communicates with the Commissioner of Police all the time. And as a result of those communications, in the specific instance of goods and services, Madam Speaker, over the period March to September, which is the period within that social media posting, the Ministry of Finance has released $244 million to the police service for goods and services. $244 million. Remember, Madam Speaker, the allegation is that we did not release 1 red cent for goods and services between March and September. We have released and credited $244 million. And I can say that I had a discussion with the Commissioner of Police not too long ago in terms of giving him the assurance that we will continue to release goods and services money to the police. And I can say now that we intend to release and provide grant of credits for the entire allocation for the 2019 for the TTPS.
You have exhausted your supplementals? Okay, Member for Naparima.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Is the minister saying that the Commissioner of Police misadvised the population when he said that he only had money for recurrent expenditures for salaries and not to carry out the mandate of the TTPS? And do you not think this is an abdication of responsibility?
We'll take the first question.
So to do.
We'll take the first question. Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, as I said, the Ministry of Finance has been in communication with the Commissioner of Police indicating to him when funds would be released and when they were released and credits were granted. I am not accepting any version of reality from the member from Naparima. We have an excellent relationship with the TTPS, which is why we have released almost 98% of their allocation so far, and we will continue to release the entire remaining 3% as the case may be, Madam Speaker. There is no issue between the Commissioner of Police or the TTPS or the Ministry of Finance. We are in constant communication, cooperation, and dialogue, and we will support them in all their endeavors, Madam Speaker. I'm not taking your word for it.
Go on.
Questions on notice. Request for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance.
Member for Caroni East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 17, I hereby seek leave to move the adjournment of the House at its sitting today for the purpose of discussing the following definite matter of urgent public importance, namely, the ongoing criminal activity at the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex. The matter is definite because it relates to the continued attacks by criminals on the Eric Williams Medical Sciences Complex. The matter is urgent because the repeated cries by staff for better security go unheeded by the authority. The matter is of public importance because the EWMSC serves more than 400,000 citizens in the catchment area who are entitled to a secure and criminal-free environment at this institution.
Honorable members, I am of the view that this matter does not qualify under Standing Order 17.
Statements by ministers.
Leader of the House? I believe that there's been a discussion,
Yes, ma'am.
and there's an agreement that this matter will be stand down and be taken later
Yes.
in these proceedings.
Yes, thank
This
you.
matter is now stood down.
Personal explanations. Introduction of bills. The Government Savings Bonds Amendment Bill 2019 in the name of the Minister of Finance.
The Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In accordance with Standing Order 64-1B, I beg to move that the next stage of the Government Saving Bonds Amendment Bill 2019 be taken later in the proceedings.
Honorable members, the question is that the next stage of the Government Saving Bonds Amendment Bill 2019 be taken later in the proceedings. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it.
Motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister.
The Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 79.3, I beg to move that in the 5th session of the 11th Parliament, the proceedings on the following bills be resumed. Bill number 1, the Urban and Regional Planning Profession Bill 2019. Bill number 2, the Supplemental Police Amendment Bill 2019. Bill number 3, the Miscellaneous Provisions Law Enforcement Officers Bill 2019. Bill number 4, the Miscellaneous Provisions Local Government Reform Bill 2019. Bill number 5, the Private Security Industry Bill 2019. Number 6, the Cybercrime Bill 2017. Number 7, the Gambling, Gaming and Betting Control Bill 2016. Number 8, the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2018. Number 9, the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2018. Number 10, the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2019. Number 11, the Constitution Amendment Tobago Self-Government Bill 2018. Number 12, the National Statistical Institute of Trinidad and Tobago Bill 2018. And number 13, the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Bill 2018. Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker.
Honourable members, the question is that in the 5th session of the 11th Parliament, the proceedings on the following 13 bills be resumed. The Urban and Regional Planning Professional Bill 2019, the Supplemental Police Amendment Bill 2019, the Miscellaneous Provisions Law Enforcement Officers Bill 2019, the Miscellaneous Provisions Local Government Reform Bill 2019, the Private Security Industry Bill 2019, the Cybercrime Bill 2017, the Gambling, Gaming and Betting Control Bill 2016, the Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters Bill 2018, the Tax Information Exchange Agreements Bill 2018, the Income Tax Amendment Bill 2019, the Constitution Amendment Tobago Self-Government Bill 2018, the National Statistical Institute of Trinidad and Tobago Bill 2018, and the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority Bill 2018. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it.
Public business, government business, bills, second reading.
The Minister of Finance.
What the hell? No, it's not supposed to.
Damn it. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Government Savings Bonds Act, Chapter 7141, be now read a second time. Madam Speaker, before you this afternoon is the Government Savings Bond Amendment Bill 2019. The objective of this bill is to amend the Government Savings Bonds Act, Chapter 7141, to make provision for tax-free government bonds to be issued to facilitate the purchase of Housing Development Corporation, or HCC houses, and to increase the total value of bonds issued under the Act. The proposed amendments to the Act are premised on government's policy objective to provide increased access to adequate, affordable, and decent housing to the general population. A concurrent policy objective of the amendments, Madam Speaker, is to encourage individuals to implement a savings plan towards the purchase of affordable housing by offering an attractive and easily accessible investment instrument that will enable persons to attain home ownership in the shortest possible time frame. By way of background, Madam Speaker, the Government Savings Bonds Act was enacted in 1962 to authorize the issue of savings bonds, to declare the terms and conditions applicable to the bonds issued, and to provide for the rights and the securities of bond holders. The Act was subsequently amended by Acts number 50 of 1982, number 103 of 1983, number 11 of 1988, and number 14 of 1995. The Act at present provides for the issue of 4 different types of savings bonds, namely government savings bonds, national tax-free savings bonds, tax-free housing bonds, and national savings bonds. In the case of government savings bonds, national tax-free savings bonds, and tax-free housing bonds, regulations have been made under Section 8 of the Act, which prescribe the particular aspects of each type of savings bond. Government savings bonds regulations were introduced by Government Notice number 88 of 1962. National tax-free savings bonds regulations by Government Notice 2016 of 1977. And tax-free housing bonds regulations by Legal Notice 157 of 1988. Tax-free housing bonds were introduced into the Government Savings Bond Act by Act No. 11 of 1988. These legislative amendments appear to have been intended to facilitate a system under which tax-free housing bonds were to be issued by government to individuals, the proceeds of which could be utilized for the provision of mortgage facilities by approved mortgage companies. This system was supported by consequential amendments. Madam Speaker, I set a noise down. So yeah, I know it's my people.
Minister of Finance?
I'm being disturbed, Madam Speaker.
As a seasoned member, I know you would not allow yourself to be disturbed. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as I said, tax-free housing bonds were introduced into the Government Savings Bond Act by Act No. 11 of 1988. These legislative amendments appear to have been intended to facilitate a system under which tax-free housing bonds were to be issued by government to individuals, the proceeds of which could be utilized for the provision of mortgage facilities by approved mortgage companies. This system was supported by consequential amendments to the Income Tax Act, Chapter 7501, to Section 8, which treats with exemptions to income tax, and the Corporation Tax Act, Chapter 7502, in the 5th Schedule, to provide a tax benefit to approved mortgage companies, and was facilitated by the then National Housing Authority. Madam Speaker, in January 2015, by the Finance Act No. 2 of 2015, the National Tax-Free Savings Bonds regulations were amended in Regulation 9 to significantly decrease the interest rates of that category of bonds from 6% for 5 years, 7% for 7 years, and 8% for 10 years to 1% for 7 years. 1% for 5 years, 2% for 7 years, and 3% for 10 years. The stated rationale for this decrease was that they were out of line with current market interest rates. And Madam Speaker, this information can be obtained from the Hansard in the House of Representatives. However, Madam Speaker, on coming into office, this government recognized that there was a paucity of low-risk investment opportunities with attractive returns open to the average citizen. Persons such as pensioners and hard-working tax-paying people who do not have a significant amount of money to just put aside in investments offered by commercial banks and other financial institutions with little or no returns. Therefore, this government introduced national savings bonds by the most recent previous amendments to the Act done through the Finance Act No. 3 of 2016. Those amendments were aimed at addressing in part the consistent annual decline in ordinary Trinidad and Tobago dollar savings deposit rates by enhancing the availability of the Trinidad and Tobago dollar investment grade instruments across various points on the yield curve, thereby stimulating domestic savings to finance investments. These national savings bonds have an attractive maturity profile of 3, 5, and 7 years, and attractive interest rates accruing at 6-month intervals of 3% for 3 years, 3.5% for 5 years, and 3.75%, respectively, for 7 years, payable upon encashment of the bonds. Continuing in the vein of providing a much-needed stimulus to our domestic capital market, while at the same time providing greater accessibility to housing, it is now proposed by this bill that a new category of bonds be established under the Government Savings Bonds Act, and that is HDC housing bonds. And I stress HDC housing bonds. This is primarily intended to address a situation with public housing. These bonds will have the added feature of the ability to be used directly for the purchase of a house from the HDC, whether as a down payment or substantial payment. It is also proposed, Madam Speaker, that these HDC housing bonds be tax-free and that there be no limit on the value of the houses purchased utilizing HDC housing bonds. The particular aspects of the HDC housing bonds will be set out in regulations to be made under Section 8 of the Act. I now turn to the specific provisions of the short bill before us, Madam Speaker. And you will see that it is indeed quite a short bill, Madam Speaker. The Government Savings Bond Amendment Bill has just 5 clauses, Madam Speaker. And Clause 1 is the standard short title of the bill. Clause 2 is the interpretation section of the bill, which provides just an interpretation for the word Act, which means the Government Savings Bond Act. Clause 3, Madam Speaker, will insert a new Section 2B into the bill to the effect that the proceeds of the sale of tax-free HCC housing bonds issued under the Act will be applied solely for the purchase of housing from the HDC by individuals. And I want to stress again, this is only for public housing. This clause is to operate notwithstanding Clause 2A of the Act. The rationale for this provision, Madam Speaker, is to allow for the mechanisms currently under the Act related to tax-free housing bonds to continue, and that is with respect to bonds that will be used for mortgage payments, to continue to operate, while at the same time making provision for the issue of these new HCC housing bonds, which will be available for use for down payments and to make payments to the HCC for houses. As I mentioned earlier, the Act currently provides for 4 categories of bonds, one of which is tax-free housing bonds. Tax-free housing bonds have been previously issued under the Act to facilitate the purchase of housing through mortgages. Pursuant to Section 2A of the Act, the proceeds of tax-free housing bonds shall be applied solely for the provision of mortgages to individuals for the purchase of houses. But the possibility exists that there still remain some holders of these tax-free housing bonds that were issued some years ago. I will go into, in a little while, Madam Speaker, the information I have with respect to the bonds that were already issued. And let me deal with it now. In 1962, bonds with a tenor of 12 years were issued in an amount of $6,780,068. In 1978, bonds with a coupon rate of 6% were issued in an amount of $6,259,500. In 1983, bonds to a total of $5,941,850 were issued at a coupon rate of 6%. In 1986, bonds totaling $6,819,800 were issued. In 1988, bonds totaling $18,341,100 were issued. In 1992, bonds totaling $14,842,850 were issued. In 1993, bonds totaling $14,430,450 were issued. And in 1994, bonds totaling $12,841,850 were issued. Let me just recap, Madam Speaker, the way the text was a little confusing. So let me go back. In 1962, 6.78 million. 1978, 6.26 million. 1983, 51.9 million. 1986, 68.0 million. 1988, 18.3 million. 1992, 14.8 million. 1993, 14.4 million. And 1994, 12.8 million. It appears after that, Madam Speaker, for one reason or another, the use of government savings bonds and housing bonds fell into abeyance. And we intend to revive it at this point in time. So that there may still be some people outside there who hold tax-free housing bonds from years ago, and we need to protect them. Clause 4 of the bill will amend Section 3 of the Act to attain 3 objectives. Firstly, the Minister will now be authorized to issue both transferable and non-transferable bonds. The Act as it now stands only authorizes the issue of non-transferable bonds. In other words, they can only be used for one purpose. This amendment is necessary, Madam Speaker, or by one person. This amendment is necessary, Madam Speaker, to allow for flexibility in the issue of bonds so that where necessary, for example, to facilitate the purchase of housing, bonds may be transferable. And where it is desirable for bonds to be not transferable, they will be issued in a non-transferable form so that the government now has flexibility. Clause 4 will raise the current limit for the issue of savings bonds from the current $2 billion to $3 billion. The Act was most recently amended by Act number 10 of 2016 to raise the limit from $300 million, as it was then, to the current $2 billion ceiling. The amendment in 2016 was made to facilitate the introduction of the National Savings Bond under the Act, as I mentioned earlier. Consequently, since it is proposed that an additional new category of bonds be established and issued under the Act, it is necessary to again raise the limit. This is necessary so it will be feasible for the government to issue more than one category of bonds at the same time, or issue bonds during the tenure of a previously issued bond without exceeding the limit. Finally, Madam Speaker, Clause 4 of the bill will amend Section 3 of the Act to allow for the limit under Section 3 to be amended as may be specified by the Minister of Finance by order. The final clause will amend the schedule of the Act in Part A to insert the new category of bonds, HDC housing bonds, and in Part B to provide that tax-free HDC housing bond regulations be enacted to govern the issue of tax-free HDC housing bonds. As is the case for all bonds issued under the Act, it is intended that regulations be enacted to prescribe the aspects of the HCC housing bonds, including matters such as the interest rate, maturity profile, encashment of the bonds, authorize fiscal agents, where and how bonds may be purchased, and matters related thereto. Now, Madam Speaker, the underlying purpose of the matter before the House is to create 2 situations, Madam Speaker. Firstly, it is the intention of the government to create a revenue stream for the Housing Development Corporation. One of the things that has humbugged the housing development effort over the last many years, through all governments, has been the availability of funds, because it has been a challenge for all governments, I would say, over the last 20 or 30 years, to allow persons who occupy HCC houses through the rent-to-own system or through the license-to-occupy system. It has been a challenge for all governments to convert those persons from rent-to-own or license-to-occupy into a mortgage situation where the full proceeds for the sale of the house come to the Housing Development Corporation. The way the system is supposed to work, Madam Speaker, as the government constructs houses and persons get their mortgage loans through TTMF or otherwise through the commercial banking sector, then those funds would be the feedstock for the construction of new houses. But unfortunately, over many years, for all sorts of reasons, it has proven a challenge to get that steady income stream coming in so that purchasers of houses now will provide the funding for the construction of houses in the future. So this government has decided that it is necessary to provide the HDC with a steady stream of funds in this way through the issue of HDC housing bonds. When persons purchase these bonds, they will be able to keep them if they wish. or they can accumulate them. We're doing it in this way to help the little man, so that persons will be able to buy bonds in, say, denominations of $1,000. Someone may be able to accumulate one bond a month, and therefore over a 3-year period, Madam Speaker, at $1,000 a month, someone could accumulate $36,000 in HTC housing bonds, and then use that $36,000 worth of bonds to purchase a HTC house for the down payment or towards the purchase of the house if they cannot otherwise qualify for a mortgage of the amount required. So we're issuing these bonds really to help the little person, the person who does not have a lot of money and can only put away a certain sum on a monthly basis. And this allows them over a period of years to accumulate sufficient money so that they can pay the down payment or pay towards an HTC house. Because one of the challenges we have found in this government, and all governments have found this, is that the majority of persons who are desirous of obtaining an HTC house can't afford it. The majority of persons who wish to purchase a HTC house fall into the rental category when an assessment is done of their income and their ability to pay to purchase a house. So that there's a large body of persons outside there who are seeking to obtain an HTC house who simply can't because they don't have the capital and they don't have the income stream required. So this measure is designed to encourage people to save, because that's another issue we have in this country. There's no ingrained culture of savings for housing, and therefore this is to encourage people to save towards an asset which they would have for the rest of their lives, and also provide the income stream to the HTC, Madam Speaker, because the proceeds of these bonds will be given to the HTC to give them cash flow to continue their construction program to complete the houses that they have under construction. And housing is not cheap, Madam Speaker. The annual cost of housing, for example, in 2015, Madam Speaker, the expenditure on housing under the previous government, $1.75 billion, and that's typical of the kind of money that is required to be put into the housing system. We have not had those kind of, we put in 1 year, $1.75 billion. And that is under you. So, Madam Speaker, don't ask me how many houses you built. I'm not sure you built any at all. So, as Madam Speaker, I won't let them distract me. So that the yearly cost of the HCC program in 2015 was $1.75 billion. We have not been able, we do not have the funds from taxation on incomes and profits and other sources of government revenue to spend at that level. I can tell you in 2017, this government spent $1.27 billion. In 2018, $1.21 billion. And in 2016, $807 million, Madam Speaker. And that is the cost of the housing. That's the cost. I'm simply giving this information, Madam Speaker, to show that significant funds are required in order to continue the government's housing program. The HCC has told us it has a budget of $1.8 billion per year, which is what they need over the next several years to complete their development program, to complete ongoing projects, to complete houses under construction, to complete projects that have been approved for construction, to acquire land for new projects, to construct infill housing on existing housing estates, and to do refurbishment and retrofitting. The figure given to us at the Ministry of Finance is $1.828 billion, is what the HCC has told us they require over the next year in order to continue the housing program to deliver houses at an affordable price to the population of Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker. But in terms of revenue, Madam Speaker, the mortgage conversions and rental and so on, and sales, the HCC revenue is significantly below that. For example, when the former administration expended $1.75 billion, or committed to expend, because we inherited a lot of debts. That 1.75 is in fact expenditure and commitments made by the former government in 2015, that 1.75 billion. The revenue of the authority was only $554 million. So there was a shortfall in 2015 when you had those expenditure and commitments of 1.75 billion for HEC housing of over $1 billion, Madam Speaker, $1.3 billion shortfall in funding for the HTC's revenue, for the HTC's construction program. In 2016, the HTC's revenue was $479 million, and in 2017, there was an aggressive push on mortgage conversions, and I must congratulate the Housing Development Corporation for this, because when you look at mortgage conversions in 2015 was only $31 million under the last government. Under this government, mortgage conversions in 2016 rose from 31 million to 166 million. And then in 2017, they rose again from 166 million to $350 million in 2017. So the HCC's revenue grew from 554 million in 2015 to 884 million in 2017 because of a push towards conversion to mortgages under this administration. But it's still not enough. When I look at the revenue went up to 884, but the expenditure and commitments are of the order of $1.8 billion, Madam Speaker, so that the shortfall is between $800 and $900 million a year if we had continued the momentum for public affordable housing, HCC housing in this country, and Madam Speaker. And all of us who are, Mr. Deputy Speaker, those of us who are parliamentary representatives will know that one of the most significant requests made to all of us as MPs is for housing. When people come to see you in your constituency offices, there are certain categories that you can tick off: employment, housing. Sometimes housing is before employment when people come to see you and so on. And that's because there's a need, Madam Speaker. There is a need. And a responsible government has to deal with the demand and the requirements of the population. So we are launching this amendment to the Housing Bond Act, and I can tell honourable members now that the housing bonds will be at attractive interest rates. One of the interest rates that we are considering is similar to the NIF bonds, where you got 4.5% over a 5-year period. That's the kind of range we have in mind, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for the first issue of HTC housing bonds. We're still looking at whether we should issue 2 series, 3-year and 5-year, because there will be some people who would prefer a shorter time frame for the investment, and others would be prepared to save over a 5-year period. But we're looking at 4.5% for the 5-year bonds, and maybe a little less than that for the 3-year bonds. But this will still be significantly more than what is offered in any other form of investment outside of the National Investment Fund, NIF bonds, which is an innovation of this government. So that we expect over time, Madam Speaker, because this requires a lot of education to the population to get them to understand that when they invest in these bonds, not only will they be getting attractive interest rates over the period that they are saving, so that at semi-annual periods, persons will receive their interest on the bonds as they continue to save. They can reinvest the interest in the bonds, or they can take the interest for their expenses and so on. And in addition to getting interest at attractive interest rates, they'll be able to accumulate savings, which they can use for a down payment for an HTC house. Because as I said, that is one of the main challenges that I can speak as a member of Parliament. Many of the people who come to me can't raise the down payment for an HTC house because they're simply at the lower end of the income level in this country, Madam Speaker. So that this is not a complex bill. It is simply adding a new category of bonds called HDC housing bonds to the original existing government savings bond system. These bonds will be issued in the near future as soon as this legislation is debated and passed in the other place. The Minister of Finance will make the necessary regulations indicating the tenor of the bonds, the interest rate, where persons can purchase bonds, because we intend to make this as simple as possible for everybody. So there will be a number of authorized agents, primarily banks and so on, which will be authorized to sell these bonds on behalf of the government. Of course, the HEC itself may be eligible for this, so that the availability of the bonds will be made easy for people, and we intend to go on a marketing and an education program to encourage people to save towards the purchase of their own home, Madam Speaker. I beg to move. Madam Deputy Speaker, I beg to move. Sorry, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I apologize.
Honourable members, I shall now propose the question for debate. The question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Government Saving Bonds Act, Chapter 7141, be now read a second time. I recognize the member for Urupu East.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and thank you very much, colleagues on this side of the House, for the warm reception. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's a pleasure to speak. Well, let's begin by saying it's a pleasure to speak. But it's a pleasure to speak, and particularly on a matter of such grave importance to ordinary citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and a very important sector in the national economy. The speaker before me, the Minister of Finance, in piloting this measure, I think took all of about 29 minutes to pilot what the minister indicated was a one-page bill. But Mr. Deputy Speaker, just to take a note, that the one page of this amendment bill involves $1 billion Trinidad and Tobago dollars. It's the most expensive page ever as an amendment. So the minister spoke, and just to cover a few issues, raised the issue, of course, of the plight of the sector, the housing sector, the challenges facing the Housing Development Corporation, told us about the problem with revenue for the housing sector, the HDC, and of course, rooted his argument and his position on the role of the HDC as being very pivotal to this initiative. And to some of these issues, I will respond as I proceed. And of course, spoke about the very importance of education and marketing this type of initiative by the government at this time in our national development, given the crises we face in every sector and the confidence. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in reading this amendment bill, it's very, very important that one refers as well to the Parent Act, Government Saving Bonds Act, Chapter 7141, and study the amendment in the context of that Act of Parliament, particularly as it relates to the areas that we are amending, Mr. Deputy Speaker. One of the key areas here in dealing with this matter is that citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, whether they be ordinary citizens, potential bondholders, whether they be institutional investors, whether they be the professional class of people, and so on, there are a lot of questions to ask. So the presentation really focused on questions that would arise, and I'm sure the minister in his winding up would want to respond to some of the questions that would necessarily arise, because this is no ordinary bond scheme. Normally, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when governments, all governments, participate in this type of economic activity, raising funds through a debt security instrument like a bond, it is normally, the purview of the financial banking community will comment a lot, will understand those issues, will understand sometimes, Mr. Deputy Speaker, some of the more technical and financial issues arising out of bond security instruments and the challenges and the management and, of course, the regulatory environment for such an initiative. But this today we are dealing with an issue which really touch and concern ordinary people. Whether it is the attendant at the gas pump, at the gas station, it is a worker at a fast food outlet, toiling all day for a few dollars in the evening, whether it is for the taxi driver. Because for housing, we often remind people that you have what could be over 175,000 persons on a database for housing. And to satisfy that is indeed a big challenge of any and every government. And different governments will, of course, have different initiatives and so on. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the use of housing bonds have also gained currency across the world, and particularly in some of the Commonwealth areas that we look at, the United Kingdom, Australia, and of course in the United States and so on. And the emergence and the incidence of running or floating these bonds would have to do, as the minister indicated as well, on financial constraints, because you have to provide what is called in other jurisdictions social housing. And because you have to provide social subsidized housing, we call it here, you have to raise money. And the traditional way of raising money, of course, is direct transfers from the Treasury, or you borrow in the commercial sector. You borrow from the banks. So in the United Kingdom, in particular, the United States, the state of California, we have looked at quite recently, 2018, they would float these bonds because it will help you to get cash. So in a simple way, this is really a scheme to raise money, to get money. And it is a borrow, it is borrowing, it will go as a debt, because the government, through the institutions, and we'll come to that in a few moments, they take money from the pocket of people. And they borrow that money and tell the people, look, after 5 years in this case, you can come and take your principal repayment, and we have now interest payment for you. So that is your borrowing money. This has serious implications as well for the debt stock, and I believe other speakers on this side will address that matter specifically, the implications on the debt, because there's a huge borrowing. At a time when the government cried down borrowing in the energy sector, indeed dismantled that sector because of borrowing and the debt that was created by former administrations in 2008. But Mr. Deputy Speaker, so the debt is a big issue here. The amendment came to this in 2016. The minister made the minister indicated in 2016, I believe it was, that we had moved from 300,000 to 2 billion in this matter. There's also another issue, and I just wanted to early clarification. In Section 2A of the Parent Act, it says, and I quote, "The proceeds of sale of tax-free housing bonds issued under this Act shall be applied solely for the provision of mortgages to individuals for the purchase of houses where the cost of construction together with the cost of land does not exceed $250,000. Now that was amended. We would just like to get a reference to the amendment and what it was amended to, because some of us were looking, but obviously it had to be amended. It's just to find the necessary amendment in what could be a finance act of some kind. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the approach of the government is to ask persons, individuals and corporations, institutional investors, to invest with the government to build homes, and that money will go to the HDC. Today, the minister kept, and I took note, 7 times in that short 26-minute speech or whatever, told us that the HDC is the centerpiece of this. They will be building the homes, they will be handling the mortgages in collaboration, I imagine, with the TTMF, and they are the centerpiece of this business, the HDC. So what happens in a nutshell, again, and I like to speak in more simple ways so ordinary people can understand, is that you are asked to buy this instrument called a bond, buy bonds, and the minimum you can pay is $5,000. But you can buy as much as you want once it's divisible by 5,000, by 5. So you purchase, you can buy $100,000, $200,000. The first issue is there a cap? Is there a cap on purchasing the bonds? In some schemes, they put a cap so that you don't allow individuals or institutions, for that matter, to just, by monopoly, pounce on a sector, and this sector involves real estate.
This involves critical real estate in this country, and you don't allow individuals and or institutions to pounce on a sector by overbuying, over-purchasing these bonds where there's no cap as to how much you can buy. You can indicate that. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, let's get the same example of one person. One person would use $5,000, buy bonds. We are told that this is at an interest of 4.5%. So at the end of the year, I believe that interest is annually. Is it? I think it's annually. You get 4.5% of 5,000 is? Caroni East will tell us is $200 or so. So at the end of the year, you have $200 in interest. That being tax-free is of no help to a low-wage, low-income worker. Because that person may not even be captured for tax purposes. So the tax-free nature helps the large investor. That's the first thing, not the lower person. So $5,000, you go there. How it works is that you buy your bonds, $5,000. Every year you get $200. At the end of 5 years, you get $1,100, more or less. So it is $1,100 you are getting after 5 years, tax-free. Because you will get back the principal repayment of your $5,000. That allows you are paying for preference. It's a pay for preference scheme. So by buying this $5,000 in bonds or more, you somehow jump the queue at the HDC, assuming that you qualify for housing. Assuming that you qualify for housing, not only at the point of buying the bonds, but at the point when it is mature, when you are ready to redeem it for mortgage financing purposes, you qualify. You jump a queue. Now there's a fundamental issue that I'd like to raise with that, is that to what extent does that represent an equitable system for provision of social housing? Mr. Deputy Speaker, over 50,000 persons have lost their jobs since 2015, thereabout. Many people have lost their homes. Petrotrin workers have lost their homes. People have lost their jobs. First to begin, the paradox is I don't know where we will get the individuals who can cough up $5,000, $10,000, $50,000 to buy bonds. MEPMA for Naparima has some insight as to where that will come from. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that's the first challenge. But the second challenge, of course, is that should we be proposing a system where it's pay for preference? You pay to play. So you buy bonds and you jump the queue. So the man or the woman who is waiting 15 years for an HDC house, and we had a program, Mr. Deputy Speaker, called It's Been a Long Time Coming. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, there was a fellow by the name of Trevor Dell. I would never forget his name so long as I live, and even after. He came and he was waiting 45 years or so. It was my age at the time. He was waiting from the moment I born to get a house. And that program, It's Been a Long Time Coming, was for persons who have been waiting for over 10 and in some cases over 15 years for social housing. Now, should your program of bonds also favor persons who have been on the waiting list for so long? Or should it just be that anybody comes, you apply last year, and we say, listen, we're buying $100,000 in bonds, and I jump the queue. When 5 years come, I say, okay, I'm ready to redeem now. Look, my bonds, I hand it to the HDC, and I get a deduction, I think, in the mortgage financing arrangement. And that is a fundamental issue of equality of treatment. That is an issue I'd ask the government to consider, because in other bond schemes, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this has worked in several parts of the world where they implement this. They actually target the type of people that it is for. It could be specifically for low-income applicants. In the United States, because of their own, structure of their politics and their own nature of their society, some of these bonds are raised for monies for homes for veterans, military people. Some for farm workers, police officers. In fact, in another case I was reading, when you raise money this way for social housing, it is for persons 35 years and under, for young persons who to access housing at an early stage and so on. That is not the issue. The issue is, should we have this system that the government is proposing today, that you just pay to play? If you have the money, buy the bonds and you jump the line over everybody. You will there's a risk that you can create a system where persons who have the resources can be financing other people to buy bonds, and one person could end up with 25 HDC homes that they then become a landlord and renting HDC properties. So But what I'm saying is that you have to put the regulations and the safeguards in place so that persons are not buying bonds because they will access an HDC house through someone else who is qualified, because you still have to face the HDC and be qualified. And maybe some more thought. When I read this the first time, I thought in principle, let me make the point very clear, and we agreed on this, I thought in principle nothing is wrong with a housing bond. I don't know how to what extent saving, but a housing bond. But it needs to be done in a particular way where you meet the test of equality of opportunity, and particularly for social housing, low-income workers, low-cost housing. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this matter came on the national agenda, I think, in a bold way by the last budget statement of the Minister, 2018, October, a famous budget statement. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, we are now, 2 weeks away from the reading of the budget. And it's interesting that they come quickly before the next budget presentation. So when we listen to the minister in about 14 days, they will break down the table, because they have done it. But they have come to the parliament with the 2 weeks before with the legislation. That being so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this legislation, I put it to the minister, needs to be thought out properly. The other major issue I want to raise early o'clock is, Mr. Deputy Speaker, these amendments as well speak to two areas in which there's a movement in the thinking. When this bill was introduced in the 60s and developed over the 18s, there was a concern that it was bonds to be purchased by individuals, non-transferable, so that you purchase your bonds, you have your home intact, you can access housing. It was not meant to be for corporations. It was not meant for the economic elite. Today, the minister brings an amendment, the effect of which is to give the minister power to transfer bonds. Now, let us be very clear, Mr. Deputy Speaker. While we talk, Mr. Deputy Speaker, about individuals here, we are talking about individuals, bonds for individuals, it must be very clear that the individuals cannot raise $1 billion in bonds. Individuals in this country and persons on the application list at the HSC cannot come up with $1 billion Trinidad and Tobago dollars. So the policy that the minister outlined earlier this year, I believe in May, is that they will invite individuals and the rest will be taken up by institutional investors. You see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, they were all over the country quarreling when this government of the People's Partnership, when the member for Siparia had the vision to use other state enterprises for social development. We were using the NGC and other state enterprises for social development. They complained. Today, they're involved in picking the pocket of the ordinary people and using the same state enterprises to finance housing. So what is wrong that NGC finance sports grounds throughout the country for persons, sporting facilities? But today, these institutional investors will be banks, insurance companies, pension funds, state enterprise that make profit. You think of unit trust, you think of NGC. They will buy into this because the individuals cannot come up with $1 billion in bonds that way. It will be after a while, and we estimate that 40% will be individuals, 60% conservatively will be institutional investors. Look at the effect now. The minister now aggregate onto himself this power to transfer. What happens when, I'm using just as an example, NGC buys $300 million or $100 million in bonds, and they decide to transfer in the secondary market. And they go to private players who are already gaming in that sector. Whether it's Scotiabank, whether it's some private commercial bank, they will now capture state real estate and have control over the real estate of the state. By that power that the minister is giving himself. So I want to put you on notice immediately that we will table an amendment to delete that provision that gives the minister the right to transfer. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there's another issue here in the amendment that I want to touch again. The minister comes again and is removing from the Parent Act at 3B, such other sums as may from time to time be specified by resolution passed by both Houses of Parliament. So here it is, Deputy Speaker, the purpose of a debate on anything is to bring accountability and scrutiny to government policy. That's the purpose of debate. We all know the government has the majority, so at the end of the day, the government will have its way. But the opposition, generally it will be the opposition, will speak on issues, raise questions, and there will be accountability in the public space. Today, the Minister of Finance, I think reeling from some personal crisis that he finds himself in, the Minister of Finance is now asking the Parliament to remove this provision of resolution passed by both houses to put into the law now, delete the words after the words by. There's a typographical error in reading this, but that is small. And substituting the words as may be specified by the minister by order. So ministerial order will now change, create change now from sums, from monies, from bonds. To increase borrowings.
Go to 10 billion.
Without parliamentary scrutiny and approval. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we believe this is wrong. We believe it is an attempt by the minister. It is an attempt by the minister that is unacceptable to assume a great power over millions, hundreds of millions of dollars and billions of dollars. The minister ought not to have this power, and we propose to delete that provision in the amendment bill to return to resolution passed by both houses. The minister should spend some time and try to defend his private matter there. Mr. Deputy Speaker, let me move on. The issue is a savings bond as well. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, this, as I said, came in May 2019. The minister spoke about these amendments that has implications as well. Now, there's an interesting point here to raise, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Now, I don't know if I'm happy or I'm scared that the HDC is at the center of this matter. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is an HDC that could not, well, let me start over again. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am angry that the power to deal with this matter, to deal with this bond issue, to treat citizens on an equal footing, to work with the TTMF over this bonds issue where people are spending millions and millions of dollars, will be left to the board of the HDC. That is the board that sell out the country and their interest in a recent contract. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, how could we, because the issue is that when you raise bonds, a critical ingredient of any program to float a bond is confidence. It is critical. When the banks do it, it's the same thing. It is critical. If you have banks that just lack all confidence in themselves, they can't float nothing. They can't float a tube. They will sink. This is confidence. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am not exhibiting anything here, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because I don't have permission to do that. But I have on my desk July 13, 2018, one Newman George signing away the patrimony, signing away the interests of Trinidad and Tobago in a framework agreement. It is here in a framework agreement, and we are asking the same Newman George to go now and preside over $1 billion, over $1 billion in spending on a bond. This man should walk the plank. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this same chairman of HDC has been appointed to Guaracara and Paria trading. That involves billions of international deals. What will happen to us? And this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there is a nexus which I will come to, because I know my friends next door, they are grabbing the standing orders as I speak. Yeah. Mr. Deputy Speaker, when this program of bonds was introduced, it's very interesting. When this bonds was introduced, it was to build 6,000 homes. It was for low-cost housing. It was a promise to have 3,000 every year from 2022. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the introduction of the bonds in May 2019 was exact synchronization and alignment with the contract with the Chinese to build the house.
I noticed it for the second time. I know you said you did not have permission to display.
Sure.
But you are subtly, holding it up at certain times. So please, please, please.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. If I was subtly holding it up,
members, proceed.
I'm reading, and Mr. Speaker, let me put on my glasses so I don't have to get it to display. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I will leave it on the desk. I'm dealing with the framework agreement signed by the chairman, the very chairman that is now in charge of the HDC, and will now go to, I think he was promoted, will go elsewhere. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the contract terms there I'm asking, the houses you have to build, because listen, understand what is happening here. This bond, as soon the minister told us in his speech, so I want to just connect back to his speech because we want to be relevant. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the minister told us once this matter is passed in this house and in the other place, they are moving. Time to start collecting money. When are you going to build houses? Who is going to build them? Is it the contractors that you owe money to? Who is going to build the homes? Mr. Deputy Speaker, I put it to you that no house will be built at all between now and the general elections. This money will be collected and it will be used for other purposes. There is nothing in this law, and I'm asking the minister, put in the law, in the amendment we have before us here. We are asking you to put it here, and we can draft, if you cannot do it yourself, another provision that the monies collected must be used specifically and only to construct homes. You see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the minister has been around for a long time. The minister has been around for a long time. He knows what the bill says. It says that the bonds are to be used only for mortgage financing for homes. It doesn't say anywhere here that the money collected are to be used to build homes. That's right. It says your bond, what you have in your hand, the instrument, is to be used to go to TTMF or HDC and say, could you give me my discount on the mortgage because I have bonds. Nowhere in this bill says that the money is to be used only to construct homes. Because you see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, a contract has collapsed here, and in that contract it had to do with sweetheart deals being made with a Chinese contractor that they are now negotiating with behind closed doors, and in a way they are now horse trading to promise other projects if they would give up their rights, their legal rights. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we know that too, and we'll have some information on that. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm asking, when are you going to build the homes for these people who give you the bonds, who buy the bonds? Who is going to build it? What will be the size of the homes? Is it the same model from the Chinese HDC contract deal, where it's $1,200 a square foot, where VAT, they don't pay VAT, they don't pay custom duties on equipment, where you put up labor, you provide security and housing for labor, foreign. What are the locations of the housing estates that you propose to build with this money? Assuming that the money is really for housing. At least in the heritage and stabilization legal framework, I think you require some parliamentary approval and oversight. So you will dip your hand in it, but we will know. This way, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when the money goes to the HDC, they can do anything they want with it. The HDC can decide one morning, pass a board note, and do anything. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am very concerned, given the crash that took place with the HDC, and particularly the chairman must be held accountable. His signature is here, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And on the other contract, I believe is an official of the HDC signature is there. And this happened, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when someone was the Minister of Housing. In my time, you cannot be signing $500 million in a contract and the minister knows nothing. The minister knows nothing. And particularly, Mr. Speaker, if the chairman is my golfing partner, I expect when we're walking a 5-par or something, he would tell me that. When we come back to the clubhouse, he would say, no, Minister, after the drink, we signed a $500 million deal. I assume that he would do that, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So the Minister of Housing at the time is responsible and must take responsibility and account for this. And account. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the other issue is that we need guarantees from the government, not just for the bond, but what they're going to build, where they're going to build it, and what is the cost. And this is why I say when you do bonds like this, you actually work out in detail This is for 10,000 homes. It is for lower income persons. It is specifically in these areas. You work it out. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there's a crisis emerging as we talk. And the opposition leader has been involved as late as yesterday evening, I think it was, with HDC owners in the Moruga area, in Gomez Trace, where they came, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and the government selected them for housing, and the same thing we want to prevent with the bond. We want to prevent this eventuality, where, Mr. Deputy Speaker, they came, they issued letters and so on, gave persons the assurance that they are paying one amount of money, one fee, Mr. Deputy Speaker. They are paying one for the homes, and then they changed that, Mr. Deputy Speaker. They raised it by over, I think, by over 83%, the cost of the housing. They then tell them they have to pay a larger deposit on that, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And the leader of the opposition has taken this matter and may eventually take this matter to court on behalf of the Moruga HDC residents. So why you should, in doing the bond, in taking monies from people for the bond, tell them what is the cost of the homes that you can access, and give a guarantee that that cost will not change. In Moruga, Mr. Deputy Speaker, they increased the houses from $450,000 to $625,000, 36% increase of $120,000. Mr. Deputy Speaker, and they have enormous construction problems and so on. Well, that has been a crisis in the HDC for many years now. Enormous problems with that. The residents end up spending enormous amount of their monies to do basic minor repairs and refurbishment, which the house, needed. And
Honourable Member, your initial speaking time has elapsed. You have an additional 15. Avail yourself.
Yes.
Proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, so the point I'm making is that don't let future housing programs, particularly when people pay down on it through a bond, because you're paying down on a house through a bond, don't end up like the Gomez Trace housing estate, where you raise the money on the people. You raise by $120,000 the cost of their homes, where you bully them into paying, where you have not provided basic infrastructural upgrades and so on in the area. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I don't want to get into the crisis in housing and what we found in 2010 when we went there, but I know of the challenges that persons will face. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, this matter of the trust in the HDC in the aftermath of this collapse of this contract, their confidence is at an all-time low. And I am not sure that ordinary citizens are willing to have confidence in the HDC managing now their savings. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the use of the minister having the power to authorize the transfer of bonds is another issue that we would like to immediately flag and ask the minister to look at that. The other point is this, is that you have persons buying bonds, you have them buying, and I like to get this ethnographic approach to the dialogue, where we use the one man, one woman example. You purchase $100,000 for a bond, in bonds. Mr. Deputy Speaker, at the time of buying those bonds, you discover that you qualify for HDC housing. But in that 5 years, you are no longer qualified. You get a gift of a house, you have land maybe transferred in your name, you migrate, you leave this country. Thing bad, crime at an all-time high, you migrate. You are no longer interested for one reason or another in the HDC house. You have to get back your money and interest. So in a sense, the government will have to dip their hands in the treasury or borrow money to pay back the bonds, both principal and interest.
Shorter tones, I'll appreciate.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. No problem with that. Mr. Speaker, so at the end of the day, because it is a borrowing, the government has to find money to pay back. So what you avoided in the beginning, you may well have to do in the end, which is borrow money to pay back bondholders, because you would have used that money. When the money comes in the 2 weeks or 3 weeks window that they use for this, all that money goes to the HDC, presumably. The HDC say, yes, we start building, let's build some homes, and the money gone. So when the bondholder comes 5 years later and say, okay, could I get my money and my interest? you have to take it from the treasury or take it from a loan. You have to find it. So the government is saying they will not borrow now, but eventually they will have to borrow, because if 60% of the $1 billion would come from institutional investors, they're not interested in a HDC home in Gomez Trace. They're interested in a rate of return. They're interested in making money from a scheme that allows them to make money. Mr. Deputy Speaker, there are a couple other ideas that we want to place on the agenda here now. The government is really clear here in that, and the government spokesmen have made the point over the years, that you believe that there's liquidity in the banking sector, liquidity even among classes of individuals. You believe really that some people have money, and the banks have money, and you have a nice climate for investment, so the government would like to pioneer that. There's also a model I saw elsewhere, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with this business, where in raising bonds, maybe less than $1 billion, I believe, in that case, they targeted investment by pensioners. So you have 100,000 pensioners in this country, will have some type of savings, gratuity, and so on, that will make 1% in the commercial banks. You have a small thing put away, you make 1% in commercial banks with that. If you have that as 100,000 persons, pensioners, and so on, maybe you can encourage that class of people to invest so that they get more money on the money they have, because they are not working. Generally, as a pensioner, you're not working, so you want to do anything that you can make fresh money, because if you're dipping into the barrel all the time, eventually the barrel will finish, and you'll still be alive. So this is something we have seen elsewhere and the government can consider, because you really ought to rethink this approach of everybody invests for everything and nothing is fixed, nothing is determined. It's just you're looking for $1 billion and you get $1 billion.
And possibly more.
And possibly more. Because the institutional investors will see the rate of interest and they will invest. And particularly if it's government, state enterprises and so on, they may be mandated to invest. So you can take money from the government sector and put into housing in this way. But the group of people, the pensioners, the credit unions in some cases and so on, may have liquidity that you can use, and they may find favor with your rate of investment and with the possibility that they can invest in this. And it is a quick turnover. In fact, the time of maturity here is not 20 years and 30 years and so on. It is 5 years. It is relatively quick in the scheme of things. Their maturity is coming to an end in a few months as well. I don't think they have any interest to get, but they have something else to get. But Mr. Deputy Speaker, the 5 years fly, and a pensioner in that case and someone else with some savings and so on can easily, as a group, invest, because once you open this thing up to institutional investors, you will have a situation where you can easily have a concentration of bonds in the hands of the economic elite that will pounce on this sector. And unlike any other sector, real estate is involved here. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, state lands. A long time we had this view that state lands, would be in rural areas and cane field land, and nobody interested in cane field land. Well, in this country, people are interested in every type of land, of course. But HDC has properties, estates, land available to it in very prime locations, including Port of Spain, Diego Martin, Taruba by the Brian Lara Stadium and so on. And they're prime property. And you don't want at any time that the private sector and a small group in the private sector has control over that type of asset. That is not something that we support at all. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the key issues here in winding up really is that the pay for preference, pay to play approach is wrong. That it is too general, that it involves not only individuals, as was the initial conceptualization of this type of legislation, individuals. This is now bringing in corporate giants, corporate lions and tigers coming in the sector now to wolf up all the assets and the bonds and so on.
How we intend to address it?
Yeah. How you intend to address that? Because if you have no cap on the bonds and the amount of bonds you will buy, the large players will buy large and small players buy small, and the KFC worker, the gas station attendant, will be left with their $5,000 if they can afford it. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm happy that the Minister in his statement spoke about education and marketing. If ever there was an area in government that require education, require marketing, require talking to ordinary people, it is this. Because you expect that the ordinary folk out there who are applicants to the HDC, and today I want to make the point very clear, and I hope somebody is seeing me, that I want to ask the HDC applicants out there, don't get your hopes up high. Don't believe that when this measure is passed, when this measure is just passed, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that you can buy $5,000 in a bond, and in 2 months' time, 3 months' time, you are guaranteed of a housing unit. It has a structure to go through. It will take some time. The government and the HDC has to work out carefully what they're doing with this, which area, the classifications. Because, for example, someone buys $5,000 in bonds. They believe now that they could afford a $750,000, $800,000 three-bedroom HDC house because I have bonds. But it's not so. And the other important point, Mr. Deputy Speaker, where marketing and education would come in, is that it is not, unless I'm mistaken, and the Minister made the point, I think, in interviews, I'm not sure if today, it is not, this has nothing to do with the rental part of the HDC operations. Mr. Deputy Speaker, incidentally, when you look at rentals at the HDC, some time ago, there were over $200 million owed to the HDC from renting. They reduced it somewhat, I believe. When the member for San Fernando East had a sterling, stay at that office, that was summarily removed. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the member for San Fernando East did a lot of good work and then he was fired. So they reduced the rate in the rental sector. They reduced the rate in the rental. But this is not, unless we're mistaken, this is not a deposit on rental. Because there are other schemes, incidentally, in the world where you could actually go for deposit on rental. And you could put money and create something where people go into a rental apartment and they stay for 2 years or so because they pay up front. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the mass of people in the HDC are really applying to be renters. They cannot afford. So I would just guess, Mr. Deputy Speaker, out of 175,000, assuming that is real, 100,000 applicants would be for renting. For 100,000 persons will not be buying bonds that way. You're really dealing with 75,000 people. If 75,000 people, if everyone put 5,000, how much is it?
37 million.
No. If everybody put, it will be plenty. It will be plenty. But it will not be $1 billion. It will not be, if 75,000 people put $5,000 in bonds, it is not $1 billion. It's probably $300,000 or so. So this clearly, you're seeing clearly the institutional investors coming into the picture. And the education and marketing program must indicate squarely, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that this is not a concrete clad promise of a house because you buy bonds. But however, you will get back your principal and you will get back your interest. Yeah, and the Minister of Finance should be making that point. I know he's very busy issuing statements these days on his private challenges, which means nothing because the date that you get the planning permission was even before you delivered your speech in the Parliament. And didn't address the issue of cabinet recusal, I notice either. But I'm sure you will do that in the days to come. Mr. Deputy Speaker, back to the issue. If the Minister was not as busy as he is with his private scandal and private problems, he would have thought out this business in a much more detailed manner and would have come to the House with a more structured proposal. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I know the time is coming to an end. Let me just say again, we intend to circulate two amendments to delete, Mr. Deputy Speaker, those two offending provisions that give the Minister the right to transfer and that removes the resolutions by both houses of Parliament. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we are not at all opposed to this concept of the housing bonds. There is a use for it. We are saying that it is not structured, it is not properly thought out, and that you can create a lot of unnecessary anguish and chaos and anger. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Minister made a point I just want to reiterate. There can be no sector. I think the member for Point Fortin understands now. He understands now why some of us had to use dye very early in life. You see, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there is a lot. No, I know that is natural. That's what it says on the box. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the people who pressure you, the people who pressure you for housing can create a very difficult life. San Fernando East, I believe he had another response to people in San Fernando, but they can create a very difficult life. They can create a difficult life for a minister of housing, and at no time should we further put applicants, and I want to tell you, many applicants, and I say with respect and love, they are not the ones who will be reading this bill. They will not be reading the amendment bill. They will not be, might even be reading newspaper. You have to explain this thing. You will have to explain in novel ways, in community caravans and so on, with different type of approaches, so people understand what the bond is about, what they are entitled to, what they can get, what they cannot get, and so on. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the government, I ask them, please, to use this opportunity, again, not to fire off invectives and attack us on what we did in 5 years and what you didn't do and what. That's nice. They are now on the final lap of their 5-year term. They are in their dying days, so much so that they went on a retreat. Mr. Speaker, you retreat when you're ready to surrender. And as they come now to the point of surrendering, I just ask them to please, in the next session, you can come back to blaming people when you sit on this side of the house. You can start blaming everybody for everything. But at this time, talk about your solutions, talk about some of the issues raised, whether or not you have legitimate answers, whether or not you may want some more time to ponder further this matter, and whether or not you have confidence in the HDC as presently composed and constituted to handle $1 billion of citizens' money when they collapse a $500 million contract with the Chinese. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I thank you.
I recognize the member for point 14. Order 44.4, you have been granted permission to your visual arts accordingly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Thank you very much. Mr. Deputy Speaker, thank you very much for allowing me to join this debate that speaks to what I consider a very simple and a very short bill, basically 5 clauses. The bill touches significantly on the people of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the poor people of Trinidad and Tobago. You know, as the member for Oakwood East spoke a while ago, I remember an old Shakespeare phrase that says, the eye sees not itself but by its own reflection. And I get a sense that he was seeing this initiative by this government based on his own perception and looking for all kinds of innuendos and things in between that. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this bill affects the lives of the very citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. And I want to make it quite clear to the member of Oakwood East, who went on and spoke to the fact that it's something that has been used throughout the world. And yes, it has been used successfully. We're not the first to invent it. It has been used quite successfully. The bond used to offset, to encourage persons at the lower spectrum access for low and middle income housing. This is what this is all about. If one looks clearly at the third clause, it speaks quite succinctly to shall be applied solely for the purpose of purchase of houses from the Housing Development Corporation. So, Deputy Speaker, the member for Oakwood went on to suggest that persons are expected to raise $1 billion. Now, I mean, that is almost ludicrous. When we are targeting low and middle income persons, we don't expect them to raise $1 billion. What we are doing, in a sense the bill is doing, is encouraging people at the low and middle income level to be able to participate, to own their own homes and their own houses. The member for Oakwood East was a former housing minister, and he knows quite well that there are certain criteria. One of the things that this government did as soon as it got into office was to reduce the earnings cap from $45,000 to $25,000, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And we did that so that the people at the low and middle income would have the access, the majority access to low and income. Because one will well understand what happened during the last administration, that people at the upper level were getting most of the access to the homes and so on. This government decided that we were going to target the low and middle income persons. Hence, we reduced the cap from $45,000 under the last administration to $25,000. And that still holds, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It still holds, notwithstanding the issue of the bond. So his charade in terms of raising $1 billion does not apply. The criteria of being first-time homeowners still applies, so that there's still consistency in our delivery to attract the low and middle income persons. So, Deputy Speaker, he went on again to speak to issues pertaining to the agency board and what he mentioned a while ago. Let me put it quite clearly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the board of the agency did what they were statutory claimed to do. They were in accordance with the Act, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Deputy Speaker, with the certain issues that he raised, and just threw it out in parts, let me make it quite clear that this matter has been dealt with. The Cabinet has made a decision to review the issues, and that is being done. And that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it is based on a government that is based on transparency and look to protect and ensure that the people of Trinidad and Tobago is being protected and dealt with accordingly, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, today I want to focus primarily on the Housing Development Corporation in terms of our deliveries and how this bond issue will assist us, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, in particular the Housing Development Corporation, and in particular the people of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Deputy Speaker. As the government of Trinidad and Tobago, that we form part, and I will tell the member for Opuch, we will continue to form part, we will continue to stay on this side of the House, because we are the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and we continue to deliver to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. See, Mr. Deputy Speaker, one can really fully understand the history of the People's National Movement in terms of providing low and affordable housing to low and income persons throughout our very existence. One can go all the way back to 1964, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when the government's housing policy had been geared towards the mass production of houses at the time. I remember as a young man, housing development taking place in, used to be called self-help at the time, but it was under P&M government that it started. In Labre, in Point Fortin, in Morva, in Pleasantville. And we continue as a government to produce low and income houses. In 1962, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the P&M government established a task force on housing, again, with the aim in mind to provide low and middle income houses for people of this country. So we continue to see the initiatives, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The National Housing Authority was established in August 7, 1962, by Housing Act No. 3 of 1962. And that authority, Mr. Deputy Speaker, was created primarily to construct and distribute single-family units in developments for low again and middle-income personnel. So, Deputy Speaker, in 2004, the Housing Development Corporation was formed with a mandate to facilitate provisions of affordable shelters and associate community facilities for low and middle income owners. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in order to further assist these citizens, access for housing, and even more important, to own their own homes, mortgage interest rates have been steadily reduced and tax incentives were given to encourage home ownership. Again, incentives that were created by this government, by the P&M government over time, with a focus, always on a focus, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And again, you can see the nexus between what we've done in our history to what we're doing today. Again, focusing on providing that accessibility to low and middle income owners. So, Deputy Speaker, this P&M government, in coming to office in 2015, recognized that there were over 170,000 applicants on the agency database. Something had to be done, and therefore we have to come up with different kind of initiatives. We could not go down the same road as the previous administration. We had to come up with several initiatives, again with the aim in mind to make housing accessible to the people of this country. I mentioned a while ago, we immediately reduced the earning caps from 45,000 to 25,000, thereby catering again for the lower middle income. Mr. Deputy Speaker, notwithstanding our new initiatives, which seeks to empower persons to construct and repair their own homes, this government recognizes that we have a duty to provide the basic needs of man, which is shelter. We have to, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We are cognizant of the fact that there are a number of people in our country who require the basic shelter. This is what we're all about. And hence the reason for the initiative of this bond today. And that is why the figure is so attractive. We're talking about $5,000 deposit, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is pitched deliberately to treat the persons at the lower spectrum of earnings in Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the government is committed to the creation of wholesome communities with the provision of affordable, well-designed recreational spaces, design houses, and commercial centers for low and middle income. And I'm stressing the low and middle income. You hear me repeating that because, again, there's a nexus between that and the issues of bond. You know, the member for Opuch mentioned people will be skeptical and so on. And if you recall, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when the Minister of Finance laid the NIF, the NIF in the South, there was a lot of skepticism on the other side. A lot of skepticism on the other side. You know what happened, Mr. Deputy Speaker? The NIF was oversubscribed, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It was oversubscribed. And I'm seeing a similar kind of sentiments coming. And I can assure you, there are a number of people in this country who would jump to the occasion presented by this government to involve themselves in this bond, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I can assure you that this would be the case. So, Deputy Speaker, the member for Opuch, you know, in his talk, sort of slightly talk about what has this government been doing. So, Deputy Speaker, when we came into office, there were so many stalled projects that we have to restart, left by the last administration. There are so many stalled projects. As a matter of fact, Mr. Deputy Speaker, there were almost 1,900 plus stalled projects that we encountered when we came into office. To date, we have restarted 785 of those units. And another 1,700 are under construction. So we had to spend a length of our times, we had a number of our times dealing with developments that the last administration just abandoned. Just abandoned throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago. In Point Fortin, you know, in Corinth. You could name it, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Several of the developments were just left abandoned for whatever reasons they had. Left abandoned. So we had to restart those projects, and we have done that. We have done that quite successfully in a number of areas I mentioned a while ago. And to date, again, we've heard from time to time the member for Oakwood saying that the government has not built a single unit. Well, let me tell him that we have delivered to date, Mr. Deputy Speaker, 2,264 units to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. 2,264 units to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And another, I want to correct another misinformation, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that's outside there. The misinformation. And most of the time articulated by the member for Opuch, I've heard it from time to time, that this government have not started a single development in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, let me correct that information today. We have started 13 projects. 13 projects, Mr. Deputy Speaker, by this government since they came into office. Since they came into office, with a yield of 1,888 units, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And we have started
48-1. I didn't say that today. He's responding to something I say somewhere. 48-1.
Overruled.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So, Deputy Speaker.
Silence.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I want to repeat it, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for the people of Trinidad and Tobago, for the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Since this government came into office, we have started 13 projects, and I can call them for the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Carina Gardens, formerly known as Referral, started the 16th of August 2016, and completed and delivered, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Bona Arucas, September 2016, completed in June 2019, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Malabar site started under this administration in June 2017, completed May 2019, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Riverside North San Fernando started under this administration, June 2017. And I can go on and on. There are 13 such projects for the people of Trinidad and Tobago that this government has started, and we will continue to do so. So when I say that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's to show the people of Trinidad and Tobago that the bonds The nexus between what I'm saying and the delivery of these bonds is for us to be able to, again, deliver much more in terms of the housing stock to the low and middle income people of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, when one looks at right now at the cost, the average cost of construction, the average cost of construction of the AGC normally ranges from about $400,000 for a two-bedroom, single-family unit to $750,000 to a townhouse. When you put that together with what this government has done in terms of reducing the interest rates for people who have income up to $14,000, and then from $14,000 above, up to $14,000, they can now access a 2% interest rate from the lending institution. This, again, was done by this government, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So you're looking at a reduction in the interest rates, 2% up to $14,000 and 5% over $14,000. With houses ranges between $400,000 for two bedroom to $750,000 for a townhouse and so on. Again, making it more accessible to the low and middle income persons. And again, I join a reference that persons who involve in the bond distribution, the bond accessibility, will again benefit based on what I've just mentioned in terms of the cost of houses, targeting once more the low and middle income citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this government is not wasting taxpayers' money. It's not wasting by leaving projects unfinished or incomplete. We intend to complete every single project between now and next year. And we continue into 2021, 2022, because we will still be the government in power, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But we intend to complete every single project. And again, ensure that every single house that we build will be occupied by the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Not the house will remain vacant, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We intend to do that. So hence the reason why it is so important, and I want to congratulate the Minister of Finance for the initiative to ensuring. I want to congratulate him because what he has done by laying this bill here today is to show the people of Trinidad and Tobago that once again the government has their interests at heart, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the member for Opuch mentioned terms about the delinquency rate. AGC has been aggressively pursuing that exercise, and to date, we have reduced that tremendously, the delinquency rate in terms of rentals and so on. Again, increasing the revenue stream for the HTC. The Trinidad and Tobago Mortgage Finance Company has, based again on discussions with the HTC, has looked at in terms of conversion of mortgage from license to occupy and rent to own to conversion. Again, aggressively pursuing, so that the agency is not sitting by, not doing anything. They are there aggressively looking at generating revenue from the many developments that we have across the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago, reducing the delinquency, converting mortgages from rent to own and license to occupied, so that they are not sitting down there, as a member which may have alluded, just sitting down there waiting for this bond development. There are several initiatives that have taken place that the agency has been executed. And so the bond, as we go ahead and dealing with the bill, is just another of such initiatives to contribute, among others, in terms of, again, making homes available and accessible to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Other initiatives such as the public-private partnership, which, again, in that program, for instance, there are 3 private construction firms that provide in their own finance, designed and built right now within Trinidad and Tobago. One so far has delivered 60 units, and number 400 and some of the units are available to be delivered. The home construction incentive program is another program again that the agency has introduced. So there are several initiatives, all geared towards making homes accessible and available to our citizens at the lower and middle income of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, another initiative again, in terms of the Housing Construction Incentive Program, where the agency will either provide, state will either provide lands or the developer provide lands. And the developers receive a cash incentive of $75,000 on a unit selling price of more than $550,000 and a cash incentive of $100,000 on a unit selling price of no more than $750,000. Again, incentive provided for the developers in Trinidad and Tobago to get involved, to partner with HDC. I'm saying all this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to show that the issue of the bonds is not by itself. There are several initiatives, all geared towards assisting the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, the low and middle income. So the member for Opuch can't just look at the issue of the bonds. He has to look at all the initiatives that are being done and all targeted towards the betterment of our citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So, Deputy Speaker, when we look at the bill in itself, the bill currently being debated has been included to increase the momentum of the housing construction. There's no doubt about that. It will increase the momentum of the housing construction. As I mentioned a while ago, there's still the criteria in terms of first-time homeowners. There's still the criteria in terms of the 25,000 cap, earning cap, and so on. But what it gives is that the average person in those brackets an opportunity to deposit $5,000 this month, another $5,000 next month, another $5,000, so that they can build up, and that will allow them, in terms of a down payment of mortgage, solely as mentioned in the bill, in the third clause, solely for the purpose of the purchase of homes. It's quite clear what the money can, what the bond can be used for. And it's a win-win situation. It is a win-win situation. It allows those who cannot accumulate a down payment outright to save gradually, Mr. Deputy Speaker. As I said, a $5,000 this month, a $5,000 next month, a $5,000 a month, and they can build up. And therefore, it puts them in an area where they can access and be looked at in terms of housing, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Without that, it is difficult for them so to do. Because some people who cannot accumulate a $40,000 or $35,000 in one go, they have to save. And what we are doing is encouraging them. We are actually encouraging those people, the young, those who are low income. We are encouraging them to get into the window by the bond, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I can assure you that this bond will also be oversubscribed, just as the NIF was, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I can certainly assure you that, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the intention is to introduce funding into the housing program. No doubt about it. Because there is no way, and I can show it out any government throughout the length and breadth of this world, can generate the funds to satisfy the entire housing stock in Trinidad and Tobago. There are 176,000 plus persons on the database, Mr. Deputy Speaker. 176,000 plus individuals. There is nowhere the government by itself, especially in these stringent economic times, can build those houses. There must be a partnership, there must be initiative, there must be different creative ways to be able to bring solutions to those 176 plus. And while it's 176,000 today, even if we move 10,000 tomorrow, there's another 10,000 will come on stream because younger people are coming on stream. So there's a never ending. And so the government must find creative ways, must be able to find creative ways. And so I congratulate the Minister of Finance to come up with this, to understand the needs of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And so find a way, which he has done. He has done that quite clearly, Mr. Deputy Speaker, utilizing the Act, as mentioned, and therefore provide that opportunity for persons solely for the purchase of homes from the HDC Corporation, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And there's a bit of semantics by the member for Opuji when he talks about the HDC, will be receiving the funds. We know how mortgage goes, it's through the lending institutions. It must go to the lending institutions. Must go to the lending institution, whether it's TMF, whether it's Republic Bank, whether it's a credit union, whether it's whatever the banking industry is. It must be through them. So the question of the agency collecting is out of the question, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Must go to lending institutions. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Housing Corporation bonds, which would be a new category of bonds, in the Government Savings Act, as mentioned by the Minister of Finance, would be a tax-free instrument issued for the sole purpose of enabling individuals to purchase housing development corporation homes. That's the sole purpose. That's the sole purpose of the bonds, to allow people to purchase homes from the HDC. As I mentioned a while ago, just as we have done so far in starting and finishing projects, we will continue to do so. We'll continue to start and develop and produce housing for low and middle income persons. Another key amendment to the bill, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that the total value of the bonds will be increased from the $2 billion to $3 billion. The Minister of Finance mentioned a while ago that with respect to the ATC, in terms of budget-wise, there is, in fact, a request for almost $1.9 billion that we utilize on a yearly basis if we have to really deliver in a housing stock. $1.9 billion is what is required. Our annual budget in terms of affordable housing program, $1.9 billion. So that, again, by raising the amount, it gives us that kind of opportunity. The bill, as I said, while it is short, it has a serious and huge impact on the lives of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So, Deputy Speaker, and I can say quite clearly that the HGC has the ability then to pay its contractors. And I want to commend the contractors. There's a fact that we have been, we do owe some contractors, and we have done quite a lot of work in reducing the amount that we owe contractors. Thanks again to the Minister of Finance. And we continue to do so. We continue to do so because there is a partnership, there is an understanding between us and the contractors who continue to deliver HGC properties throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the housing construction program can be accelerated, and that certainly we can meet the demand based again on this initiative to introduce these bonds into the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. Bondholders will certainly make significant investment in their future, and that's what it's all about. It's a future investment. Bondholders will be pleased with the performance of this bond, as they have been pleased with the NIF, as they've been pleased with all our initiatives thus far. Notwithstanding criticism that was levied, we saw the success of the NIF, as I mentioned a while ago, and I think we will see the success of this bond, this housing development bond, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as the Minister of Housing and Urban Development, I welcome this initiative. I welcome this initiative, and I want to clearly state that I support this bill 100%, because I am certain and I'm sure that this bill would encourage the low and middle income earners of Trinidad and Tobago to participate in the housing stock of Trinidad and Tobago and give a greater access to the housing stock in Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Deputy Speaker, once again, I congratulate the Minister of Finance, and I can tell you that this government has once again demonstrated its care, its concern for the low and middle income people of Trinidad and Tobago. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I thank you.
I recognize the member for Caroni Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The Minister of Housing emphasized the fact, like the Minister of Finance, that the bill was short. And he said that it was simple, and in some senses it is. But my colleague who spoke before me on this side, the member for Orapooch East, indicated very clearly that two of the clauses raise difficulties that require some challenge on our side and some consideration from the other side. He the Minister of Housing talked about encouraging people to participate through the bond, and that is one of the reasons we support the bond, which is that we feel that it would be good to have widespread participation by ordinary citizens in the country in the bond offering. And he says basically that what they intend to focus on, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is on low and middle income housing. Now, if that were true, we would support the bond wholeheartedly. But it is precisely because the way the legislation is worded and because of the things left out, there is no guarantee of that we have some concerns about the 5 clauses in the bill. He talked about stalled projects of the last administration, the Kamla Prasad Bisesa administration, and the minister then, the member for Oropouche East. I think the member knows that projects do not start when you enter government, nor do they close when you leave government. And normally, if you are a working government, what is going to happen is that you're going to have a number of things completed, as we did in a number of areas, whether it is in health or in education or in road construction or whatever. But you'd also have a number of projects completed. All right, there was a time when the Minister of Housing was giving out, I think, keys to about 100 houses a week. But what it would mean also is that you would have projects that have not been completed, and whatever new government comes into office would continue those projects. I think that is the normal procedure. And I think that we ourselves, when we come into office at the next election, will have a number of projects to continue as well from the other side. So the other issues, I just want to correct one thing. My colleague, the member for Oropouche East, indicated to me that the River Runs Through project was a project that had in fact been initiated by his ministry at the time under the People's Partnership government. And in fact, the contracts were given out. Those contracts were taken back, that is to say they were cancelled, and new contractors given. If I am wrong about this, it is based on information conveyed by the former Minister of Housing, and I can be corrected about it. I myself am simply reporting what I think to be the correct situation on that particular project, not other projects that would have been mentioned. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is a short bill, it is true, but it does raise 4 important issues that have to do with national development. It raises the issue of the bond itself and the idea of bonds and what they are used for. It raises the issue of housing needs, but also housing policy in the country, and whether in fact the bonds being used are the appropriate means of furthering housing policy. It raises the issue of debt accumulation, because this raises the debt by $1 billion when the bond is going to be over. And it raises the question of the continuing role of the state. And I want to deal with those 4 issues. I will not be long on any of them, but I do want to raise the issues because they raise policy issues. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, that is the position, or that is the direction that I will take here. Now, this is the 3rd bond that will be used that will be issued on the local market by this government. The first bond was an asset-based bond which had to do with the CLICO assets which were bundled and raised $4 billion. Then there was a 4-year bond issued earlier this year in February for about $500 million. And this is the third bond now. It is for housing with a target of $1 billion. The original intended number by the Minister of Finance was stated as 1.5, but they have now agreed on $1 billion, we are told, and that has been set. Now, this bond was mentioned for the first time by the Minister of Finance during the midterm review last year, but the minister had in fact flagged the issue of housing before. He had raised the issue of the waiting list and the number of houses that were demanded by how many citizens, etc. And then he took the opportunity to mention that he would come with this initiative in the midterm review. Now, when you offer a bond, it does liven up the market a little bit. And that does not mean, though, if you liven up the market, that the financial sector in Trinidad and Tobago is a rock of stability. Now, we have a strong financial sector in Trinidad and Tobago. I want to say that. I am not saying that the sector is weak. But I do want to say that one has to be aware and alert to what is happening in your economy as things evolve, both externally and internally. So if we take a look, for instance, at page 47 of the Financial Stability Report 2018 of the Central Bank, it focuses on three things: vulnerabilities, key triggers, and risks, and I will get to that. And when you take a look at the last Article 4 IMF report, which comments on the financial sector, on page 16 of that Article 4 consultation report, the IMF says, and I quote from it, "An increasingly complex and interconnected financial system within and across borders, cross-border presence of banks and insurance companies, and gaps in the oversight framework for credit unions and mutual funds call for careful monitoring of systemic risks." So this is the IMF in April 2018, simply signaling that one has to be very cautious about how you manage the financial sector. And this is the central bank now in their report, which is very recent. It's this Financial Stability Report of 2018. I can't get the month here, but it's very recent. And they talk about vulnerabilities, and I would just mention them. On the vulnerability side, they talk about growing household indebtedness. They talk about high sovereign concentrations in the financial system. They talk about keeping pace with evolving international standards on money laundering, terrorist financing, and tax transparency, and rapid digitalization of the financial services industry. So they mention those as vulnerabilities. As key triggers, they mention sluggish domestic economic environment, increasing unemployment, rising interest rates on variable rate loans, sharp fall in government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago revenue, higher domestic interest rates, credit exposure limit adjustments, loss of correspondent banking relationship, and possibility of cyber attacks. And then on the risk, they talk about deterioration in the quality of consumer loan portfolios. That is basically happening now. Rise in public sector related non-performing loans, delays in executing international payments, and I might add local payments, loss of confidence in digital transformation. So whatever we are doing, we have to take into account the fact that you have a situation that needs some thoughtfulness, that needs some care, that need some caution. And sometimes a government, can create the impression that economic activity is taking place. You could have road paving, or you could have road construction, or you could have housing construction as visible indicators that something is happening in the economy. And I hope that this is not the intention behind this particular bond. My colleague, the member for Oropuch, said that with this bond, they will collect the money, but they will not build a single house. I don't want to be so unkind, but I do want to say that I hope that the intention is in fact to build houses for all of these people who need it. Now, this, in the budget statement of 2019, the Minister of Finance identified 176,000 applicants. And he said these would be subjected, no, I think it was the budget of 2015 actually. That would be the 2016 budget. He identified 176,000 applicants and these would be subjected to due diligence and scrutiny in order to establish a reliable and creditable database. And he talked about innovative solutions, and he talked about supporting and increasing the role of the private sector. In that particular speech, and it was in fact in 2019, the budget of 2019, which had been in 2018, he alleges a $12 per square feet cost during the period 2011-2015, which by all the information that I can gather is not true. The cost ranged at that time from about $600 to about $850 per square foot, and he claimed that the price per square foot was brought down by his government to $600. But the contract which the 6 ministers were celebrating with the representatives of HDC, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and with representatives of the Gazuba Group International Engineering Company Limited of China, was a contract to build units at about $1,300 a square foot. And this is something that we need to take into account when the Minister of Housing comes here to talk about low-cost housing and building housing for those who need it, who are poor. Now, that contract with the Gazuba Group has been canceled. The question is the housing program still on, and is this the bond that is going to trigger it? The issue is also who is going to do it? Where are the 24 communities that the minister talked about located? And if the 24 communities remain, is the deadline still 2020 to finish all of this housing? And the reason I ask this is because we have to be careful that the bond is not used, especially as it is going to the HDC, to create the conditions for establishing a kind of private state contractocracy that is tied to the HDC and the $1 billion payout that would be possible from this if indeed the objective is to go for housing construction. And I raise that because it is important to raise it. Because, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we cannot be here as the Minister of Housing came and focus on the ordinary citizen who is trying to get a house, and we see that there are over 100,000 of them standing in line, so to speak, and using this bond as an opportunity to tie their ambitions, their aspirations to the housing market and the HDC, And while we are focusing on that, what is really going on in the background is the award of contracts to people who are specially or who have special relations with the HDC. And I want to flag that here. I want to raise it here. I want to raise it as an issue because what it raises is the issue of the open tendering process. Okay? So now, as far as housing goes, we have not seen a lot of housing construction done by this government. The minister mentioned a couple of thousand houses. I will not doubt him, but when I look at the state of unemployment, when I look at the cement sales in the country, I do not see a thriving construction market. And these are indicators which point to that. One of the first places in which unemployment is picked up is in construction, and one of the first indicators of construction taking place in a country is sales of cement. Now, where housing contracts have been given, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the issue of transparency does arise. We've had a situation where in the case of the Chinese contracts, two issues come up. One, it had to be canceled. Secondly, when the elements of the contract were made public in the press, they became very disturbing to the population. And the third thing is that in many of the construction that are taking place other than that particular contract, we don't know what is the process by which these contracts are done. Now, a case can be made that government's strategy for housing aligns with a political strategy as well. And I think that that is something I want to raise here because it is important, because this is public money. This is the money of citizens. And the intention is to build homes for people, citizens all over the country. And the intention must be social, in my view, and not political in intent. Now, some of the houses that have been given out, as the minister himself indicated, were houses started by us and finished by them, which is not unusual. That is the normal process for a government. And where new houses have been constructed, as in the case of Maruga, we have a situation such as the one raised by the honorable member for Siparia and leader of the opposition, which in fact raises questions about the original contracts entered to with these citizens. Secondly, the variation of costs. And thirdly, the issues of quality which she raises. So I think that those issues having to do with housing are important issues for us to address as a parliament, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I hope that some member on the other side, if not the Minister of Finance, will respond on some of those issues. The other issue is the issue of debt. I said that one of the issues that arises here is the issue of debt. In the last 4 years, we've had an increase in the debt stock of about $23 billion. We are now at the highest level of debt that Trinidad and Tobago has ever been, about $100 billion. We are at the highest level of central bank overdraft that we have ever been, over $12 billion. We are at the highest level of the exchequer account in the central bank, which is over $40 billion. Now, what are the debt servicing requirements of the country now annually? I wish the Minister of Finance would tell me that in dollar terms and in percentage terms so we understand. And can we continue to increase debt and to service debt in the way that we are going in Trinidad and Tobago, even if we come to the Parliament and the country and say that the reasons are justified because we are addressing a social cause in the country? Okay? Because the debt issue is an issue on its own. It is an issue that is something that we need to consider for the health of the country. And I simply raise that because it is important to raise it, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Now, this particular housing bond for which we are legislating here today was prompted, the minister said, by the success of the $4 billion asset-backed bond, which had to do with the shares associated with the Clico Assets ownership last year. And this pointed the way to a capital raising strategy. So this particular housing bond, the minister claimed at that time, when in the midterm review, would release the HDC from its financial constraints, and he reinforced that here again today, which limited its ability to provide housing. But is this the best way to deal with an affordable housing need? Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm raising that as a policy issue. The minister talked as well about his government's self-imposed and prudent debt benchmark. This is what this is a direct quote from him in the midterm review presentation that he made before. So I want to ask, what is this self-imposed and prudent debt benchmark? What is it? Where is it written? How much is it? The limit, I mean. And how is prudence to be defined? Now, I do have the media review statement here of 2019, and I won't read it, but it is here that he announced that he will come with a bond in 5,000 investment units, and he talked about 6,000 units, 3,000 per annum, etc. And I have some reports as well which reported on things that he said related to the announcement of this particular housing bonds. Now, this takes us to the actual bill itself and the 5 clauses, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I do want to take a look at the clauses, okay? So clause 3 says the housing proceeds of the, notwithstanding section 2A, the proceeds of the sale of tax-free Housing Development Corporation housing bonds issued under this act shall be applied solely for the purpose of the purchase of houses from the Housing Development Corporation by individuals. Now, does that guarantee everybody who holds a bond an option for an HDC house, Mr. Deputy Speaker? Because I think it is possible to interpret this in various means, in different ways. Is it only for housing from the point of view of the individual investor who invests, or can it be for something else, simply as an investment instrument? But the more disturbing area is in section 3 of the Act is amended in subsection 1 in the chapeau by inserting the word issue, after the word issue, the words transferable or, and therefore what that does is that it makes the bond transferable as well as non-transferable. And that opens the door to all kinds of interpretations and the reasons for it. And I want to flag that. I think it is important. The other issue here in C, by deleting all the words after the word by and substituting the word as may be specified by minister order, the way that is written, just as the way the one with the transfer of is written, it is very hard from reading the clauses to know the context or to know what it is about. But when you go to the parent bill, you realize in B, that's to say in 3(1)B of the bill, that clause says such other sums as may be from time to time specified by resolution passed by both houses of parliament. And this is now changed, it's altered because it's now deleted to as may be specified by the minister by order. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I think that my colleague flagged it, but this is a very serious matter. And it's a serious matter because I think the way that it is presented is also a problem. Because just so the minister, you move in this bill, just so they move 300 million to 2 billion and now to 3 billion. Okay, that's the first thing that they do. Well, that is okay. You're raising the amount that you can raise on the market. Okay, and you're doing it, we are seeing it clearly, so that's okay. But just so also is transferable and non-transferable introduced, and I wish the minister would give us an explanation of what exactly is transferable now to whom that was not transferable before. I really need to understand that. The minister may tell me that it's a simple thing and I don't understand, but for the sake of the population, the minister says he has to use marketing. He says he has to use education to inform the population. I would like to understand clearly what is going to be transferable that was not transferable before and by whom to whom. I need to understand that. And just so, with these words, with the stroke of a pen, the Minister of Finance has taken away the power of Parliament to scrutinize the motion before the House and to reside that power in the person of whoever is the Minister of Finance at the time. In this particular case, the current Minister of Finance. Now, I find that problematic, Mr. Deputy Speaker. All right? And I feel that there is some deception here. All right? Because by reading the amendments literally, you cannot get the clear and true intentions of the amendments. So that, in a way, it is very deceptively crafted. So I am saying that we are suspicious of why the bonds are now being made transferable. And depending on the explanation, if it is not satisfactory or does not allay our suspicion, we are certainly opposed to that. And we are very definitely and definitively opposed to the Minister of Finance simply usurping the power of Parliament just so. Now, it is difficult to say whether all individuals who subscribe will be allocated allocated housing. We need that clarified. What would happen to others on the priority list who do not subscribe to the bond? what is going to be the role of institutional investors who are going to come after the individuals who have subscribed a portion of the $1 billion? What is the intention with this bond? Is it for a secondary market? Is the idea to promote?
Your initial speaking time has elapsed. You have an additional 15. Care to avail?
I would like to.
Proceed.
Mr. Deputy Speaker. Is the idea to develop a secondary market, and whether, in fact, the original intentions of making housing available quickly and plentifully to large numbers of people who need it, affordable housing, whether that original intention is going to be defeated by the other things that are possible by the legislation here, in the creation of institutional investors and the creation of a secondary market. So, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the savings and investment aspect of the bond is good. We support that. The debt aspect of the bond is problematic. And I want to alert the country to that, and I want to flag that to the minister. And I want to, no, you can get up and speak if you wish.
Talk after.
You can get up and speak if you wish. The debt aspect of the bond is problematic. And the possibility of one or several institutional investors redeeming the bond and holding the government debt, I think, is a little troubling. And the policy issues around housing are also a little troubling. I have something here in which, oh gosh, you can get up and speak. You get a chance. What?
But again, there's a procedure. The member has not given way. So let's cease that discourse. Member Kearney Central, again, address the chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I will do so. I have an article that was written by one of the securities company in which the writer of the article says investors continue to bemoan the lack of new public bond issues coming to market. Well, this will satisfy that if in fact there is a need, while secondary activity has also been subdued. So maybe it will also satisfy that secondary market need, Mr. Deputy Speaker. But I would like the Minister of Finance to indicate that, because what I am saying is that there may well be a contradiction between the original intention and what are the possibilities that are made possible by the legislation that we are now seeking to pass in the House. Now, there are all kinds of things going on in the world now, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And as you know, the crisis that we had here in 2008, 2009 was related to an external crisis outside. It had to do with a collapse of the financial market. The collapse of that financial market was based on a housing crisis. It was also based on the development of derivatives based on housing and real estate. And that ultimately, you had a triple whammy when the price of energy went down and the price of real estate, and real estate really crashed all over the world. That was 2008. There are some people who claim that that crisis that we faced in 2008, 2009 has not really been overcome yet, although people have sort of gotten back on their legs. They feel that the crisis has not really been abated, has not been solved. But the situation that we have now at this time, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is one in which people are talking about the possibility of a global recession again, in which there are trade wars, in which there are issues having to do with energy again in Saudi Arabia, in which Brexit, what is happening in Brexit threatens the whole fabric of that institution and happening in Europe. So that we are dealing with a situation where the world itself is also in turmoil. And as we do our business here, we cannot do our business as if, we are isolated and alone and insulated, and that we are not alert to what is happening elsewhere. So I simply mentioned that, just as I mentioned before, that we need to be cautious about the strength and the resilience of the financial system in Trinidad and Tobago. So I mentioned this other one, the fact that we are dealing with the possibility of instability and recession, given all the things that are taking place. And I leave it there. I simply want to raise the matter because I think it is important to raise it. So I asked the question, what is government's housing policy? From the point of view of the Minister of Housing who spoke to it, he said basically the housing policy is to make affordable housing possible and to make it in greater numbers to people in the country. And the question I ask is this the only way to do this thing? How do they make housing available in the private sector market? They offer their properties for sale. Somebody makes a down payment. You might make a second down payment on it. That way the developer gets money in his hands, begins the development, whether it's homes or apartments. And during that time that the construction is taking place, a mortgage is being arranged. And at the end of the day, by the time the property is finished, the construction is over, the person has a mortgage, the banks have a mortgage, the person has property ownership and a place to live, and the person who is selling, the vendor, the property developer, has gotten their money so that, in a sense, everybody is happy in the process. Now, why do we want to do this for public housing as a bond? And why do we want that money in the bond, raised by the bond, to reside in the HDC? Okay? And why do we want the individual owner who is really paying for a house to pay in the bond to get an interest, okay? Whereas that person could be paying for a particular house in a particular place on a particular property, and within the 2 years or whatever that it takes to build the house, everything is arranged through home mortgage bank or whatever it is, so that HDC gets its money, the property owner gets their money, get their house, sorry, and everything works out just as you would in a private sector transaction. Why are we taking this convoluted way? And I am raising this issue because I'm not sure that that is the right way to proceed. And therefore, I want to raise an issue that might be a little troublesome, which is the issue of, should the state continue to operate in the same way as it did in the days of the, was it NHA before HDC, NHA, the HDC, etc. I mean, they have already initiated the process of public-private. The state has a number of properties in various places that it owns. It doesn't have to divest itself of that. But wouldn't all of this be a lot more efficient and effective and stimulate the economy better if you had an open, transparent bidding process and you tell the people what is the price that you want to sell the homes for, and the developer would have to fit into that process and provide those homes so that everybody gets transparently what everybody needs. So the contractors can work, the individual homeowner gets his home, the efficiencies are built into the system. Why do we have to build this terrible state apparatus and continue it and fund it, and with all its effects? You talk about the fact that so many homes were abandoned over time, etc. Why do we have to do that? And it really raises the question, Mr. Deputy Speaker, of what is the role of the state? I mean, we have a situation in which we have to ask that question, given the financial situation of our country, given the difficulty of balancing budgets, given the difficulty of dealing with the debt situation and repaying it. Basically, 17.5% of our revenue, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is going to the repayment of debt servicing. It is going into debt servicing in this country. You know, and we have a serious problem. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I think my colleague, the member for Oropuch East, said that they had not thought this thing through properly. And I really don't think, I think we have to begin thinking through what are the right strategies for the country in all of these policy areas, even while you acknowledge that there are inequities in the society that must be addressed, that there are needs in the society that must be addressed, and that there are social concerns in the society that must be addressed. But that does not mean that you have to have the state in the middle of everything. I think that it is possible to think through a regime that allows you to address this particular situation of housing need and of the need to save, both of which are commendable things. I commend the Minister of wanting to create a savings instrument. I commend the Minister in terms of wanting to make savings possible as moving towards a home. But we have other problems here, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I don't think that the Minister, I don't think the bill, I don't know if what was the intention behind the bill, but I think there are contradictory possibilities once we pass these bills that will in fact undermine what is the original intent of this bill. And on the debt situation, I want to say that there is...
Remember, you have 2 more minutes.
Yeah, I want to say that there is a difference between official debt and the level of indebtedness of a state, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I want to say that the level of indebtedness of the public sector in Trinidad and Tobago is way, way, way beyond $100 million. I wouldn't deal with that today, perhaps at the budget time, depending on what kind of budget the minister brings. We could address some of those things. But I want to say that given the debt situation in the country, given the difficulty of fiscal space in managing budgets and budgetary allocation and development needs in Trinidad and Tobago, I think that perhaps we have taken a wrong approach in bringing a bond to pass on the money to the HDC, for the HDC to give out contracts to people to build houses that are meant to be affordable housing for ordinary people, poor and middle income people. And I think that this is a mistake in policy in the manner in which it has been approached. Thank you very much.
1 second, member. As agreed by the leaders on both sides, we will now revert to statement by ministers, and I will call upon the Minister of Finance at this time, and additionally, permission has also been granted for him to go beyond the 10 minutes required time. Proceed.
Not by much. Not by much. Thank you very much. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am authorized to make this statement on the results of the request for proposals for the sale of the Pointe-à-Pierre Refinery. Mr. Deputy Speaker, Trinidad and Tobago's largest crude oil producer, operating the country's only petroleum refinery, ceased refinery operations on November the 30th, 2018. The refinery was plagued by high and increasing debt, low productivity levels, escalating manpower costs, and an expenditure pattern of habitually surpassing its earnings and income. The refinery lost billions of dollars every year. Following the closure of the company, Cabinet agreed to the establishment of a new state enterprise, Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited, TPHL. TPHL was vested with the responsibility to manage the former Petrotrin's oil and related assets, which in turn now fall under management of 4 subsidiaries, as follows: Heritage Petroleum Company Limited, the New Exploration and Production Company, Paria Fuel Trading Company Limited, Legacy Petrotrin, which manages all legacy items of the former Petrotrin, and Guaracara Refining Company Limited, which was established to replace what was known as Petrotrin's Pointe-à-Pierre Refinery. Upon the closure of the Petrotrin Refinery, the government indicated its intention to offer for sale or lease the refinery and associated fuel trading facilities where applicable. The bidding process was divided in 2 stages, with stage 1 of the bidding process attracting 77 expressions of interest. Of this 77 potential bidders, 25 elected to sign non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, which then allowed access to a virtual data room containing highly confidential information on the assets and on the overall process. Further, of the 25 potential bidders who signed the NDAs, 8 proceeded to submit non-binding offers, NBOs. During stage 1, the following key criteria were utilized to evaluate the bona fides of each of the 8 remaining bidders. 1, proposal contemplates a restart of the refinery. Very important. Potential buyer or lessee possesses refining and marketing experience or has reasonable prospects of attracting a partner with such experience. 3, proposed purchase price or lease terms are potentially attractive. And 4, potential buyer or lessee has demonstrated that they possess the financial capability to fund the proposed purchase price or lease payments and the capital expenditure required to restart the refinery. After evaluation, a short list of 5 bidders was prepared as follows: 1, Beowulf Energy; 2, Glencore Limited; 3, Edgewood Holdings; 4, Klesh; and 5, Patriotic Energy and Technologies Company Limited, Patriotic for short. Subsequently, in June 2019, Cabinet agreed to the appointment of an evaluation committee of senior public servants and industry professionals with a mandate to make a recommendation to Cabinet on the undermentioned: 1, select a preferred bidder; 2, negotiate and finalize a binding offer; 3, negotiate and execute a definitive agreement for lease or sale; 4, initiate negotiations of critical commercial agreements; and 5, negotiate any government incentives and conduct environmental audits. At the close of bids on August 20th, 2019, 3 bidders submitted compliant binding offers for the purchase or lease of the refinery, namely 1, Beowulf Energy; 2, Klesh; and 3, Patriotic Energies and Technologies Company Limited. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Evaluation Committee comparatively reviewed all 3 proposals on 12 specially selected criteria, ranging from financial capability, upfront consideration, history of refining and marketing experience, refinery restart time, proposed crude slate, exclusivity period, lease sale arrangement, SPA-LA comments, union involvement, social and economic aspects, bidders' equity, and approximate time for the start of preparation for the ultra-low sulfur diesel plant. I shall deal first with upfront consideration. In terms of an upfront cash consideration, Patriotic was the only bidder which offered an upfront payment consideration. Their proposal indicated upfront cash of US $700 million for the refinery assets, plus US $300 million for the non-core assets of Legacy Petrotrin, for instance, a hospital. However, non-core assets were not offered for sale by government. Beowulf offered no upfront consideration, but instead proposed a lease payment of US $42,000 per month over a 15-year initial term, and a future 50-50 profit sharing contingent on Beowulf recovering its capital investment and achieving a 15% internal rate of return. Clesh's proposal indicated that the only payments to the government would be through taxes. Sale purchase agreement and lease agreement. Patriotic submitted a reasonable markup of the sale purchase agreement, as did Beowulf. Clesh did not submit any draft agreements. Union involvement. Patriotic has as its sole shareholder the Oilfield Workers Trade Union. Beowulf advised they will comply with existing labor laws. Clesh indicated that they currently operate in a unionized environment at the Heide Refinery and have no objection to workers being unionized. Social and economic aspects. Patriotic proposed the introduction of staff incentives through a performance-based framework. They also committed to improving the work culture. Beowulf highlighted direct job creation and proposed to incentivize staff through profit sharing. Clesh also highlighted direct and indirect job creation and their direct impact on the economy through the payment of taxes. Equity. Patriotic indicated its intention to secure an equity and debt provider. This transaction would be through asset-based financing. Beowulf proposed to use its finances to fund the due diligence exercise and indicated that another entity was willing to provide debt financing. Clesh signaled its intention to utilize its own finances to fund the due diligence exercise. Mr. Deputy Speaker, after reviewing all the facts as presented, Cabinet today agreed to select Patriotic Energies and Technologies Company Limited, a company wholly owned by the Oilfield Workers Trade Union, as the preferred bidder for the sale of the Guaracara Refining Company and Paria Fuel Trading Company on the following terms and conditions. A, that Patriotic be given 1 month to present to the Evaluation Committee a satisfactory and comprehensive work plan on how it intends to complete the process going forward with respect to the following key deliverables. 1, confirmation of its ability to finance the purchase and operation of the refinery. 2, a draft sales and purchase agreement and various other commercial agreements, including of crude handling, domestic fuel supply, natural gas supply, product offtake and transition support. 3, a finalized business plan that addresses other key deliverables, inclusive of the provision of a guaranteed, reliable, and seamless supply of refined petroleum products to Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean region, ensuring the long-term viability of the refinery and reducing its carbon footprint. 4, a statement of any fiscal incentives or tax concessions required from the government of Trinidad and Tobago. 5, an approach to any historical environmental liabilities. 6, a refinery startup plan, which involves any necessary additional work inclusive of the refinery refurbishment plan and the terminal startup plan. 7, a plan for the supply of petroleum products during the transition to full operationalization by Patriotic of the refinery, inclusive of the finalization of an MOU with Trafigura Pte. Limited. 8, a suitable staffing plan inclusive of senior management. 9, proof of qualification to engender the startup and performance enhancement process for the new business, as well as the evaluation of growth opportunities to deliver solutions that integrate information, analytics, and insight to solve client challenges at all points along the energy value chain. And finally, approval from the Board of Directors of Patriotic for the definitive terms and conditions of the proposed transaction. Cabinet also agreed, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that Patriotic be granted a 3-year moratorium on all payments of principal and interest towards the purchase of the refinery, and a further 10 years at a fair market interest rate to complete the payment of the sum of US $700 million it has offered for the refinery. Cabinet also agreed that the evaluation committee be reconstituted as follows, with a mandate to submit its findings and recommendations to the Cabinet on the aforementioned issues within 6 weeks. The evaluation committee comprises Mr. Vishnu Danpal, Chairman, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance; Mr. Selwyn Lashley, Energy Strategic Advisor, Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries; Mr. Anthony Chantak, Director of Trinidad Petroleum Holdings Limited; Mr. Sahid Hossain, Chairman, Trinidad and Tobago National Petroleum Marketing Limited; Ms. Sandra Fraser, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries; Mr. Ian Welch, Chemical Engineer; Mr. Joseph Remy, Trade Unionist; Mr. Dale McLeod, Insurance Executive; Mr. Terence Barrett, Attorney at Law; and Ms. Arlene Chow, Interim CEO of the Heritage Petroleum Company. I thank you.
Well done.
Chief Whip, Chief Whip, Chief Whip, Standing Order 24, any feedback? Okay, honorable members, at this time we will suspend for tea and we will resume at 5 o'clock. 5:15? All right. 5:15.